Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're going to hang tight for just a few minutes as people are logging on today, but happy Thursday to you. It is Thursday. So glad you can join us today. And I'll probably get started in about 30-45 seconds as everyone is logging in today. As you're getting settled, just a reminder that this is a webinar, which means your cameras and microphones are off and will stay off for the entire presentation today. So you don't have to worry about accidentally hearing kids in the background, or if this is your opportunity to eat lunch or have a snack, feel free to do that, get comfy. And I'm seeing our attendance stay pretty steady. So let's go ahead and get started so that we can make sure we honor your time today and get you out on time, because I know that early childhood career doesn't come with a lot of spare time. So we want to make sure we get you back in the classroom or back doing what you need to do as soon as possible. Welcome everybody to Hatch Early Learning's webinar for the month of January. I am really excited to be with you today as we talk about game-based learning, how that can be a game changer in the early childhood classroom. You'll see, we'll do just a little bit of housekeeping before we dig into our content today. If you find that chat box on your toolbar that's on your computer screen or your tablet screen or your smartphone screen, that's an opportunity for you to participate through today's webinar. You'll see that we have some information that was already posted in there. We'll also provide information about how to receive a certificate in that chat box at the end of the presentation today. Hello to everybody who's saying hello in the chat box. We're glad to have you with us today. I'll start with a brief introduction of myself, and then we'll kind of get going on our content for today. My name is Kylie Raymanowitz. I am a content manager here at Hatch Early Learning. That means that I am in charge of developing content for our digital products. So I write and research games for our app. I've been working on our new product, which you'll get to hear about soon, called Ignite Table. And I make sure that we have fun, engaging opportunities for kids to play and learn together through all of our product suite. I have a background in early childhood in many settings, but I started my career in the classroom, teaching a mixed age preschool classroom, 2.5-year-olds to 5-year-olds for about 2 years. And then I discovered that I really loved teaching adults. So I went to school and got my master's degree. And then I did some parent education and lots of professional development for childcare providers and early childhood professionals over the years. And I'm really glad to be with you here today. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about game-based learning and gamification. What is it? Why does it matter? Why is it important? We're going to talk about the benefits of game-based learning. We'll talk about some strategies to make learning activities fun and engaging in your classroom using some of these game-based strategies. And then we'll talk about how Ignite, one of Hatch Early Learning's products, uses game-based learning to make learning fun for kids. So you'll get some examples of game-based learning and gamification in a digital tool or digital product. So we'll start by doing kind of a brief explainer of what game-based learning and gamification are. So there are a multitude of benefits when children learn through play, right? You all know that quote from Maria Montessori, play is a child's work. Play is critically important to development in the early years of life. We know that children develop intellectual skills and knowledge when they play. When they play, they're building skills related to multiple domains of development like science, math, and literacy. They're also building content knowledge and working on creative thinking. They also get to practice social development while they're playing. They have the opportunity to start making sense of relationships. They practice skills like reading cues, listening, and taking another person's perspective. They build friendships and learn to share ideas, to express themselves and compromise, and they can start to practice skills for collaboration. They can also practice skills for executive function, which we know is really important to success in school and also later in life. They can practice skills during play for self-regulation, delaying gratification, waiting for those things that they want, controlling their impulses. So maybe I really want to hit my friend because he took the puzzle that I wanted, but I'm going to stop myself from doing that because I know that hitting isn't going to solve my problem. And they can also practice managing their attention. Self-regulation is related to peer acceptance and positive self-worth. So this is a really important skill. And when children play, they also practice their physical development. Play provides opportunities for children to develop muscle control, coordination, reflexes, strength, and understanding of their body's abilities and limits. So play is critical to overall development for children. We know that within play, there's this spectrum of playful learning. So there are different types of play and playful learning, and they all have opportunities to help children learn and grow. There are some variables that kind of determine the degree to which an activity is considered playful learning. So we have on the left side of this spectrum, free play or self-directed play. In the middle, we have guided play, and on the right side, we have games. So 3 variables kind of determine the degree to which an activity is considered playful learning: the level of adult involvement, how self-directed the learning is for the child, and whether or not the play has a learning goal. So towards the left end of the spectrum, activities have more child agency, less adult involvement, and loosely defined or no learning goals. Farther to the right, we see heavier adult involvement, but that still includes children directing the activity or directing the play. So let's get a little bit more information about these 3 types of playful learning. So when we're talking about free play or self-directed play, the child initiates the play and they direct it, and there's no explicit learning goal. They decide what they're doing, they decide how they're doing it, and we don't have a goal in mind for what we want them to learn. Guided play is initiated by an adult, but it's directed by a child, and we have an explicit learning goal in mind. So a great example of this would be a small group activity. It's guided. I'm deciding what the learning goal is. Today we're going to practice writing letters. I'm initiating the activity, but I'm letting the child direct the play experience. And then on the right side, we have games. So in gameplay, the adult initiates the play, the child is still directing the play, and we have that explicit learning goal. We know what we want them to learn and to practice. So we're going to talk specifically about games and gameplay today when we're talking about game-based learning. So this is to give you kind of foundational knowledge, remembering that when we're playing games with children, we are initiating the learning as adults, they are directing the learning, and we have that learning goal in mind for them. So we're going to start with a question next, our first opportunity for participation. So in that chat box, if you can navigate to that chat box and think about how you would respond to this question. How do games help us learn? And how do adults use games to learn? And then I'd like you to type your response into that chat box and submit that. And we can have a little discussion about games before we dig more into the details, the nitty-gritty of game-based learning and gamification. So how do you think games help us learn? And thinking about yourself or other adults, how do we use games to learn? How do adults use games to learn things? Give you a few minutes to type those responses in. Knowing that it takes a few minutes to type, especially if you're on a phone or a tablet, it's a little slower when you don't have a keyboard at your disposal. We'll wait a few minutes and see what chats come in here. So Heather says they can help learn taking turns and many other things. Yes, everyone remembers the first time you played Candyland with a group of children and little Jimmy just can't stand to wait for his turn. He wants it to be his turn every single time because waiting is really hard. But it's a great opportunity to practice patience and taking turn and delaying gratification. Yeah. Myra says they have engaging connections. Absolutely. We play games often in community, right? You play games with a friend or a group of friends. And so children get to practice engaging together and having conflict and working through that conflict. Yeah, Rhonda says taking turns, engaging, problem solving. Joanne shares social skills. Yeah, they learn to share and vocabulary. Yes, Juana, I would totally agree. Games are an amazing opportunity to teach children vocabulary words because you can use specific words related to the activity or the game that you're playing. It's fun and engaging. We learn to take turns. Marnie says, I love word games. I use them to keep my brain engaged and to practice skills. Marnie, I totally agree. I'm currently obsessed. I've been doing Wordle for a while, but I recently discovered Quordle, Q-U, Wordle. And It's where you play like 4 Wordle words at the same time, and it's really challenging. And I feel like when I play it in the morning, it helps like activate my brain for the day, and I can think clear and I can be ready to do like complicated cognitive tasks, even though I might be a little sleepy. So I feel like it helps me kind of do something that's fun and challenging and get ready for my day. Yeah, so a few more chats coming in. Taking turns, learning things like counting. Yes, if you're moving a player on a board, especially, or maybe you're rolling a dice, you're doing number recognition. Depending on the game, it can teach color identification, number identification, patterns. Yeah, there are so many concrete academic skills children can learn while playing games as well. And I love that together, all of your comments shared about those academic skills, but also about the social, emotional, interactive skills that they learn while playing games too. So I think, games can be really helpful in being a fun learning event for children, but also for adults as well. I know in our house, we really like playing games. When we get together with family or friends, we go to the basement and pull out a fun game to play, and that's what we do to entertain ourselves. All right, so let's talk about games and learning. We know that play-based learning is both effective and developmentally appropriate. Game-based learning and gamification are really 2 strategies to support play-based learning for young children. So let's kind of do a brief introduction to both of these concepts, and then we're going to dig into them with some more detail. So when we say game-based learning, I'm talking about designing learning based on gaming principles. So I'm starting with a skill or a standard that I want a child to learn, and I'm building a learning experience using some game-based strategies around that skill. Gamification, on the other hand, is integrating gaming principles into existing learning. So it's taking a learning activity you already have and adding in some things on the back end to make it seem like an engaging game. We're going to talk about kind of the nuances between the two over the next several slides. So let's start with game-based learning. So what is game-based learning? It's this process of designing learning experiences using gaming principles. And we're going to talk about what those principles are in just a moment. Why do we do game-based learning? To make learning fun and engaging, because that's when we learn and remember information, right? How do we do game-based learning? So these are some of the game-based learning principles that are used to design gaming experiences that help children learn in a fun, engaging environment. First being motivation. So providing opportunities during a game-based learning experience where children are motivated to stay engaged over a long period of time. Opportunities for player engagement. So games that engage children cognitively, emotionally, and or behaviorally. So maybe they get engaged emotionally, like I want my character to win the race. I want them to win the prize. I'm emotionally invested in this experience. The game-based learning opportunities also provide opportunities for adaptivity. So making an activity customizable or adaptable helps engage each learner in a way that reflects the child's own situation. So it could be, customizing a game. You might have a game-based learning experience for your whole class or your whole small group, but you can customize it to a child's knowledge or their abilities. So you can make sure that every child, depending on what skills they're working on, what skills they have, they can get something fun out of that learning experience. We also have opportunities for graceful failure. In game-based learning, failure isn't some terrible outcome that you want to avoid. Instead, failure is expected and sometimes a necessary step in the process of learning. When I started playing the word game Wordle, I got many of them wrong. I failed many of them because I had to figure out the nuances of how to play. And every time I failed one, every time I had a guess that was really bad and I kind of wasted a guess, it was an opportunity for me to be like, oh, okay, next time I'm going to pick a word that doesn't repeat letters that I've already tested before, because that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So that graceful failure gives us an opportunity to experience some consequences that help us learn how to do it differently next time. So it's really a necessary step of the learning. In this game-based learning, consequences of failure are lowered. So children are more motivated to try new things, to explore, and they're motivated to take risks because it doesn't feel bad when you fail. It's just part of the process. You fail to figure it out. So when we have quality game-based learning experiences, they have defined learning outcomes. So again, the adult, the teacher is saying, here is the skill I want to practice while we're playing this game. So if it is a board game, for example, and you roll a dice or you spin a spinner to see how many spaces you move forward, your goal of the game might be one-to-one correspondence and helping children practice moving their piece one square for every number they rolled or number that their spinner landed on. So we have a defined learning outcome. Game-based learning experiences also engage learners' intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation means that learners are motivated to complete an activity for its own sake, not because they're expecting a reward or recognition. So in game-based learning activities, children want to complete them because they're fun, they're engaging, and they're challenging, not because they're hoping to win or they're hoping to get a trophy. Game-based learning can be used for learning. So just because we want to learn and practice a skill, or it can also be used to assess skills. So we talked about game-based learning, which is, remember, designing a learning experience around a skill or a learning goal. Let's talk about gamification. So gamification is applying game design elements into learning experiences in an educational setting. So I am taking a learning experience, something you already do in your classroom, and I'm going to add in some elements that are part of game design to make the experience more fun and engaging for children. And I already kind of talked about the why there. Why would we use gamification? We would use it to make learning fun and engaging for children. And then how is gamification used? So game features such as action, social engagement, like an element of competition or cooperation, perhaps, mastery, so showing process or growth by scoring. Maybe you've got a leaderboard, maybe you've got a progress meter where they can see how far they're moving forward towards a goal. You could have an element of achievement, so receiving awards or badges. There could be immersion, like role playing. So maybe they're a character in the game and they have that motivation to do the activity because they're involved, they're immersed in it. Or there could be elements of creativity, customization. So being able to create an avatar of themselves or decide elements of their learning experience. Quality gamification experiences allow children to grow through active participation. So gamification experiences don't limit awards to just one winner or just a few top achievers. The intent of gamification is that all children learn and grow by being actively participated in the experience. In these gamification experiences, learning and achievement is not competitive. So gamification experiences aren't competitive. Children aren't competing against each other. They're working to achieve learning goals, whether they're working independently or in groups. And in gamification experiences, children are encouraged to complete meaningful tasks. So gamification uses motivators like badges or achievements to encourage children to complete meaningful tasks, which again supports a child's intrinsic motivation to learn and explore, not just doing an activity because they want to get a reward or they want to get a trophy or they want a nice ribbon to show that they got first place. So there are some benefits to gamification, like maximizing participation and empowering students on their learning journey. Gamifying learning experiences can help children learn to set goals. So like by offering rewards or achievements for steps taken toward a goal, that can help promote goal setting. And it can also support learner agency by encouraging children to be an active part of their learning experience. It can also help children build skills for self-reliance and self-control. So let's talk about why game-based learning matters. What are the implications of game-based learning in education? So when children participate in game-based learning, they have the opportunity to learn to view failure as an opportunity. So games present natural opportunities to fail. And while failure isn't always fun, as we've talked about, seeing failure as an opportunity to learn is something new and try something different, is helping children develop a growth mindset, which is, again, a critical skill to help them be successful, not just in school, but also in life, because life is full of failures. When I get a new job or try a new hobby, I'm often really bad at it. I cooked something for dinner the other night that was a new recipe and it was bad. It did not taste good. We did not eat it, but it was a failure that taught me something about baking bread I didn't know before, because baking bread is hard, at least for me. So game-based learning also helps children be motivated and engaged in learning. When something is fun, we want to do more of it, and learning is no exception to that. So when learning is fun, we're motivated to do it. Game-based learning also helps children understand that learning can be measured in competencies. In our society, learning is often measured in grades, maybe not in preschool, but once you get to first grade, we're measured in some sort of grading system. Game-based learning helps children understand that learning or mastering a competency is a learning success as well. So maybe you don't have an A in the class, but if I've mastered this one skill, that's still a competency, that's still learning. And mastering larger skills happens by building one competency at a time. So maybe I'm not all the way there, maybe I'm not at the same level as my classmates, but if I know that if I master one skill and then move on to the next skill, I'm moving forward, I'm working towards that learning. Game-based learning also helps children practice skills for collaboration. Many game-based learning experiences can and are conducted in groups, giving children opportunities to practice skills for collaboration that involve both executive functioning and social emotional skills. And game-based learning also helps children understand that learning is trial and error, repetition, and practice. And what an important skill that is, right? If I want to be a really good bread baker, I have to try things and err and fail. I have to try again, I have to repeat it, and I have to practice. So I have to know that if I expect to bake the perfect baguette the first time I try, I'm probably going to be sorely disappointed. I have French ancestors, but I don't think I have strong enough French genes to bake the perfect baguette, having never tried before. I'm going to have to use trial and error and repetition and practice to get there. And that is a really important skill to teach children to be able to be successful in their lives. So let's talk about some game-based learning strategies for the classroom. There are different types of games that you can utilize in your classroom. This is not an exhaustive list, and actually I'm going to have you brainstorm, spoiler alert, at the end of this slide, some additional games. So feel free to be thinking of those. You can type those in the chat box as you think of them, but we'll go through a couple together. So I've mentioned a few board games, for example. So these could be established board games you would buy at the store, or they could be, board games that you use materials and make up on your own. So games like Candyland, Hi-Ho Cheerio, other simple board games made for children can be an opportunity to practice some game-based learning with them. You could use memory games. Again, memory games that you purchased from a vendor. They could be things that you download and print. They could be things that you make up all by yourself. Puzzles present opportunities for game-based learning. You could have role-playing games. When I was a teacher, I loved using role-playing games because my favorite thing to play when I was a kid was pretend. That was like my jam. I love stepping into a role and getting to pretend to be somebody else. And so, we would play a letter game, but it would be a role-playing game. And I would make them the letter detectives and give them a magnifying glass and a hat from the pretend play area. And they were letter detectives searching for letters around the classroom. And I would print out several copies of different letters. And I would say, we're looking for a letter that starts with a D sound. Letter detectives, you have to solve the case. You have to find the letter. So in this, they're playing a role. They get to be the letter detective. They get to search around their classroom looking for the letter D that makes a D sound. So they're still practicing this learning goal that I have for them, but in a way that's really engaging, that's really fun, where they get to pretend to be somebody else. They get to act how they think a detective would act. There are also many digital games that provide opportunities for game-based learning for young children. We're going to talk specifically about Ignite, which is one of Hatch's products for young children, but there are many opportunities for other products as well that offer some digital learning, and you may have some available in your classroom if you don't have Ignite in your classroom. So now I'm going to pause here and ask you to think, what else? What other types of game or game-based learning can you or do you play in your classroom? If you have any ideas, why don't you throw those in the chat box now? What are some other opportunities for game-based learning in your classroom? What else could you try? Maybe there are things that you're already doing that involve games with children. I'll give you a few minutes to type those in. And if we don't see any responses come in, we'll just move forward. But I'd love to hear your ideas. There is something so wonderful about professional development in early childhood is sharing experiences and sharing ideas, because I might know some cool things, but you all know some cool things too. And that collaboration, I think, is so key in making sure that we provide as many ideas as we can. Okay, headbands, I've seen that game. I've actually been seeing a TikTok recently of teachers holding up letters and asking it's usually, I think, kindergarten classrooms, maybe preschool classrooms too, to make this sound for the letter they're holding up. So they guess, the teacher has to guess what letter it is. I love that idea. Jeopardy or Fly Swat, I used to love playing that when I was in like middle school and high school. Physical games like musical chairs or Hullabaloo. Card games like Old Maid, match the missing alphabet or number, matching letters and numbers. What letter or number is missing? I love that idea, Rhonda. I'm not sure I ever did that one because that one is much more challenging than just identifying a letter or a number. It would take some time and collaboration. I love that. Oh, Melanie's offering some great outdoor game examples: balance beam, tetherball, basketball. Maybe the game is a scavenger hunt or an obstacle course. These are things, again, you might already be doing, but not thinking of them necessarily as game-based learning. Moving around the room like an animal, kids name the animal and how they move. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing those ideas with us. I appreciate that. So we've talked about game-based learning. We've talked about why it's important. We've talked a little bit about the types of games you could include in your game-based learning in the classroom. Let's talk about how do we plan for it? How do we actually do this and implement this in an early childhood setting? So here's a simple 4-step plan that involves a little bit more work than is listed on this slide, but this should be a good place to get you started. First, you want to identify your learning objectives. So you very likely already have your own standards in your classroom, whether you use a high school curriculum or a different curriculum. You might identify, I really want my group to practice this skill. We're really focusing on this skill from our standards, or maybe evaluations are coming up. I need to get portfolios done, and I really want my kids to be practicing this skill. So you choose your learning objective first. Then choose the type of game that you would like to play to practice that learning objective. So for example, using my story about letter detectives, if my learning objective was identifying letters based on letter sounds, and my game type was going to be a role-playing game. So it's kind of a role-playing game and kind of a puzzle game too, because it's sort of a scavenger hunt, I would say. And then you're going to prepare your game activities. So for me, I had letter cards that we had already used for another activity. And before the activity, I hid them around the classroom. I gathered my props, magnifying glasses from the Science Center, hats from the pretend play. We also had a cape. If you wanted to be like a really cool Sherlock Holmes type detective, we pulled the cape over there. So I prepared my activities, and then we played. And then we explained the activity and children got to work. So let's go through an activity and practice together. So I'm going to ask you to share your ideas in the chat box like we've been doing. And it's a skill we've talked about a little bit today. And so I provided an example of letter detective as a game for identifying letter sounds and correspondences. But I'd like you to do is think about, what would you do? If you want your children to practice identifying letter sound correspondences, what game would you do in your classroom? So feel free to start typing your responses in the chat box. You can tell us, what type of game would you do? A puzzle game? Would you do a board game? Would you do a role-playing game? Would you do something else? You could tell us, what materials you might use or how you would play it. And we'll hang here for a few minutes as people are typing in, because I know that takes a little bit of time. But what what kind of game-based learning would you create to help children identify letter sound correspondences? What would you put together to make this fun and engaging, to make it motivating for children, to get them actively involved in the process? A letter sound bingo. I love that idea, Marnie, because bingo is fun, it's engaging, and they're still able to practice that skill. Juana says we get a nice toy from Hatch called Owl Vowels. I love that. Maybe you're using audio. Guess the letter sound. So we're playing an audio clip for them and they have to guess the letter that it goes with. Yeah. These are great ideas so far. I'm going to wait a few more minutes as people are typing, see if we get a few more responses in here. Thinking through how you would teach children or help them practice the skill for identifying letter sound correspondences. And while you're typing, I'll tell you about one other example of a game I created related to this skill when I was teaching. So we had a dry erase board that we could carry around for activities in my classroom, and we would play Mr. Eraser for letter sound correspondence and some other games. And I would hold up the dry erase board at the table with my small group, and we would write a letter based on the sound I would give them. So I would give them a sound, they would identify the letter, we'd write it, and then Mr. Eraser would come. He was pretty tricky, and he would erase the letter. And then children would have to work together to remember what letter did he erase based on the sound that it made. So they could have a piece of paper, they could write the letters on their own pieces of paper. They got to take turns being Mr. Eraser and erasing the letter off of the dry erase board. They got to be an active part of it, and it was something different than what we normally did. All right, a few more ideas have come in. Placing letters on the floor, and children have to go on a hunt to find the letter and identify the letter of the sound that they hear. Yeah. Matching flashcards with sound, maybe using some music and dance. Matching the picture that starts with the sound of the letter, lock letter or sound match. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to do this. Somebody else has said a bingo matching letter to a picture on a bingo card. Absolutely. In many ways, you're probably doing game-based learning without thinking about it, because we know that children learn through play and games are a form of play. But we can do some game-based learning with intention to increase a child's motivation and engagement in the learning and help them practice some really critical skills too. Thank you all so much for sharing your ideas. So let's talk about implementing game-based learning with a few more details here. We'll fill in some gaps for you. When you were introducing a game-based learning experience, you can start by introducing the game. So telling children what we're going to play today. Today, we're going to play a game called Letter Detective. So I already did step 2. I'm going to state the title and the goal of the game. So we're playing Letter Detective. And when we play Letter Detective, you are a detective. A detective is a person who looks for things that are missing. They look for clues. And your job is going to be to look for the letters that are missing. Step 3 is going to be introducing children to the game material. So I'm going to show them a sample letter card, and I'm going to say, this is the type of card you're looking for. And you're going to look for the letter that matches the sound that I make. I'm going to explain the rules using an example. For many games, especially if they're new, it's a great idea to play a practice game. So we might do a practice round together where we all go around together as the detectives and we find the letter together so they understand how it works. And then we're going to play the game. You might play the game in rounds versus having one big long game. So we do one letter, everyone comes back together, then we do another letter, depending on the skill and the game type. And then the 7th suggestion here is increase the game difficulty if appropriate. So depending on the type of game and the skill, depending on the level of understanding and comprehension for the kids that you're working with, you might want to increase the game difficulty. In my preschool classroom, I mentioned it was a mixed age classroom. That meant in my small group, I would have older 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds in the same group. So 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds need to practice different skills. So I might increase the game difficulty for those 5-year-olds while keeping the game the same for a 2-year-old. And with a 2-year-old, you would scaffold and help with this type of skill anyway. But you might decide to increase the game difficulty for everybody, maybe for just a subset of children. Maybe you decide that this is as hard as it needs to be and we need to increase the difficulty, and that's okay. And then once you end the game, do a little self-evaluation. This is when you do by yourself without the children, but ask yourself, how did it work? Was it smooth? Did kids understand the instruction? Do I feel like they thought it was fun and engaging? Do I feel like they got to really practice the skill? Maybe take some notes. I'm the kind of person that if I don't write it down, I don't remember it. So maybe take some notes so that the next time you want to play the same game with the same skill, or maybe change that game a little bit to make it fit another skill, and you can play the same, kind of recycle the game but change the skill. That way you have some notes about how to improve the experience or something new to try. Maybe there's a new way to vary the experience so that it is fun and engaging for children. So when we're thinking about game-based learning, here are some guidelines for you to think about. Again, this is not a checklist. You don't have to do all of these things. And these aren't all the things you could do. There are more things you could try too. But some things to think about as you're creating or designing some game-based learning for young children. Ask yourself, does the activity include opportunities for kids to be motivated to play? Are they going to be engaged? Second is player engagement. Are there opportunities for them to be invested in the game? Do they feel like they're a part of it, or is it just something happening around them? Are there opportunities for adaptivity? Can I change the game to meet the needs of a child with a higher understanding or a lower understanding? For a child who has a special need, can I adapt the game to fit a child's skill and motivation? Are there opportunities for graceful failure? Are there opportunities for kids to fail during the game, but then try something different? So, if you're playing a sink or float as a game, for example, and the goal of the game is to try to find things that float, they're going to pick some things that sink because we learn by trial and error, right? And learning through that. Are there opportunities for action? Can they physically, mentally, emotionally get themselves involved in the game? Are there opportunities for social engagement? So can we provide an opportunity for them to engage and play with other children? So for example, in my letter detective game, wasn't a particularly collaborative game the way I had designed it, but I could put them in pairs to play the game where they also get an opportunity to practice collaboration and communication, conflict resolution. They get that social engagement too. Are there opportunities for mastery? Are there opportunities for children to kind of gain a competency in a skill, a mastery? Are there opportunities to achieve? So like playing my letter detective game in rounds, if they come back each round with a letter, that's like a sense of achievement. I did it, I found one. Even if they struggle finding one of the letters, they still have that sense of achievement. Are there opportunities for immersion or role play? And then are there opportunities for them to be creative? Can they customize the experience to fit their own needs? So maybe I'm gonna, instead of them being the letter detectives, maybe they get to draw a picture of a letter detective or choose a stuffed animal or a doll from our classroom to be the letter detective, and they get to make them a little hat. And they get to make them a little coat with dress-up clothes, and then that gets to be kind of their icon for being the letter detective. Maybe there's an opportunity to customize or get creative with it. So thinking about all we've talked about with game-based learning over the last 40 minutes or so, I want you to think about one concrete way that you're going to work to incorporate more game-based learning into your classroom. And go ahead and type those responses into the chat box now. And we'll talk about this for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to talking about Ignite and how Ignite uses principles of game-based learning and gamification to make learning fun and engaging for children. So for now, thinking about what is one concrete way you will incorporate more game-based learning into your classroom? What is something that you can try moving forward to help make sure that children have high quality game-based learning experiences in your classroom? Well, hang tight as people are typing some responses in here. So maybe sharing the same games with different skill levels throughout the classes. Latrice, I think that's a really great point. We don't always have to recreate the wheel every time we want to do a game or game-based learning, right? We can take a game and we can adjust it to fit different skill levels throughout classes. So maybe you teach younger children in the morning and older children in the afternoon. And so you might be able to use the same base of a game and adjust it as needed. Yeah, so I'm excited to play letter detective, but I also want to make it a CVC word detective. Exactly. That's a great idea, Marnie, to take an idea and change it a little bit to make it fit the learning objective that you have. Heather says, I'll put together more games based on the children that I have and do them in smaller groups. That can be helpful too, especially when you're starting out. It can be a little easier to manage and to get some immediate feedback on how it's going when it's maybe a little less chaotic. Rhonda says, choosing a skill to work on and creating games for a small group and large group with different levels in our classroom. Fantastic. And she says, I really like Letter Detective too. Thanks, Heather. It was really fun to play. My kids loved it. Okay, perfect. So we're going to keep moving forward. I don't see any more chats coming here. Let's talk about Ignite and game-based learning. I can get my slides to move. There we go. These are all of our Ignite buddies. We're just missing PJ Fox, who's brand new to Ignite and super cute. You should check him out. But when we were designing Ignite, we really utilized a lot of game-based learning and gamification techniques and strategies to make sure that the games that we were creating, the world that we were creating, was going to be fun and educational for children. Because we knew that if we created a really rigorous educational tool that wasn't fun, nobody would play it. Kids wouldn't play it. They wouldn't want to stick with it. So we created this really fun, super engaging world where children get to practice and learn lots of important skills. We know that digital games can support a lot of types of learning. So the first slide you see here is motivation. So we make our games challenging, but also really fun and interesting as a way to motivate children. So this is just a screenshot. I can't show you the whole game, but in this game, they're helping to put together an ant farm, and they have a step to the process. First, they have to collect the ants that got free by tapping them. This is a fine motor game, so they tap the ants to put them back into the little beaker there. I know that's not the right word, but I'm totally blanking on what the right word for that tool is, so I'm going to call it a beaker for now. Then next, they're going to have to drag their finger across that bag of sand and soil and then pour that into the ant farm. They're going to be able to provide the ants water and food as well. So this game is sort of like project-based learning. It's going through the steps of a project together. It's really fun and motivating because they want to get to that final product, which is the ants in their ant farm. We also provide opportunities for fun and challenging games that support player engagement. We get children involved cognitively, emotionally, and behaviorally. In this game, PJ Fox is playing hide and seek. So their goal is to try to find him throughout different scenes where he is hiding. This is a little bit small on your screen, so I'll give you a hint. He is hiding right behind this little sand tower right here. But it's really engaging and fun. We make the games fun so that children don't necessarily know that they're really learning and practicing a skill. This is where they're practicing skills for self-management. So asking for help if they need help. They can push Henry's picture if they need a hint to find him. We also provide opportunities for gamification, including a sense of accomplishment. So children play games in sets of 3. A game set is 3 games. And after each game, they get a star that pops up in the corner here. And when they get to that 3rd star, children are invited to select rewards for their personalized avatars. So who does not want to earn a gold star? And then that personalization takes place in our dressing room. So, one of the aspects of gamification that's so important is personalization. And that really is a child's opportunity to make decisions based on their knowledge or interests. They have some agency and control over some aspects of their learning. So children get to go to the dressing room, and every time they play 3 games, they get 3 gold stars. They get to go to the dressing room and they get to choose a new item for themselves to add to their buddy or their avatar. So this is my current buddy. This was my childhood dream, to be a dinosaur tie-dye princess. Mermaid, can't forget the headband, also a mermaid. But they get to decide what they look like. They get to decide what color pants they wear. Maybe they're wearing a mask, or they are wearing a crown, or they're wearing the monster shirt. They get to decide what they look like. And every time they play 3 games, they get to change what they look like too. They get to go back to the dressing room and maybe change their minds. We also provide lots of opportunities for autonomy in our play. So autonomy in the context of gamification is a child's freedom to choose and control the actions that happen in the game. Autonomous learners tend to actively reflect on processes, which helps them solve problems. So in Ignite, for each set of experiences, we begin in the Magic Treehouse, which you see here, where children get 2 doors and they get to see kind of a preview of 2 different games, and they decide which game they want to play along with their buddy. So I can play a game where I know there's going to be something about a puppy, or it looks like maybe Leela's picking up trash in her home or the classroom. I'm really curious about that. So maybe I'm going to pick Leela picking up trash because I want to play that game and see what that's all about. The experiences that are shown to children in the treehouse here follow the Ignite scope and sequence progression, while also giving children the opportunity to choose. So they're not choosing from the whole host of Ignite games. We're kind of narrowing down what they choose to make sure they're following the right scope and sequence. We don't want them to see an advanced skill if they haven't done the skills that lead up to that advanced skill or more advanced skill. So those are kind of the ways that Ignite uses gamification and game-based learning to make our product so fun, so motivating, and so successful with young children. So let's talk a little bit about where we have been today. We've talked about game-based learning and gamification. We talked about the benefits of game-based learning, why it's important, why it's helpful, why it's useful. We talked about some strategies for using game-based learning and how to integrate that into your classroom. And then we talked a little bit about Ignite and game-based learning. It's a lot of information to cover in just about 45 minutes, but that leaves us plenty of time for questions and discussion. So at this point, please feel free to share any questions that you might have in that chat box. Or additionally, if you don't have questions, but you have an idea that you want to share, please feel free to do that. As I mentioned earlier, this is an amazing opportunity to get a diverse group of educators together to share their unique experiences, their successes. Maybe you tried something, maybe you're going to show us an opportunity for graceful failure where you tried something and it was a complete disaster and you learned from it, and you can help us learn from that too. So feel free to type your thoughts into the chat box now. Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Maybe you've thought about, what your next step is to implement game-based learning into your classroom. What are your ideas? And we'll hang tight for just a few minutes as people are typing. And if we wait a few minutes and nobody is typing, nobody's submitting, that's okay. We'll just end a few minutes early today. It's completely up to you. So any thoughts on game-based learning in early childhood settings or early childhood classrooms? And share with us successes, challenges, worries about implementing it. Maybe you're really excited about trying it. So Latrice is asking, is the length of play important? It's a really general question, but I think it's a really good question. And I think my answer may not be what you're looking for, but my answer is going to be the best thing that you can do is rely on your own expertise. So play-based learning experiences don't need to be 3 hours long to be effective. A play-based learning experience could be 2 minutes or 5 minutes, I would say. And it's really important that we structure learning activities, all learning activities for young children, in a way that honor their developmental stage and their capabilities. So for example, we know that young children, preschool children, have really short attention spans. So planning a 10-minute activity might work, but it also might be really difficult to manage. So I would say use your best judgment. You know your kids better than anybody else. So when you're planning play-based learning, think about the kids that you're working with. Think about what they can handle. Think about, how long they typically stay engaged in an activity, and then start small. So start with those shorter activities, and then hopefully over time, they develop more skills, more executive functioning skills for waiting and delaying gratification. And you can try some longer, maybe more intensive kind of game-based learning experiences over time? Yes. How can we adjust some of these games for toddlers, Anna? That's a great question. I would say, keeping the learning goal in mind, think about how toddlers play. So there's going to be less structure to the experiences. You don't necessarily need to use gamification or specific game-based strategies for toddlers, because their job is just to explore the world around them. But that can still be a game. So you can hide letter cards or letter blocks around the classroom and have them, tell them the activity is to find the letter blocks or the letter cards, and then help them. And, toddlers are going to need more support and scaffolding from adults, but I think you can still kind of take the same principle and boil it down to that core. So maybe it's a hide and seek game, instead of being something that's more complicated that you would do with like a preschooler. Yeah, okay, so what about using technology for playing games? There are a lot of really great digital tools that utilize games to help children learn. Ignite is one of those tools. You may have access to some of those in your program or your district, but there are a lot of tools. I would really encourage you to do some research about what those tools look like and how they can be beneficial. If you're interested, you can reach out to us at Hatch, and we can connect you with somebody who can tell you more about our products and how we use digital tools to help children learn and based on these game-based learning strategies. Okay, Rhonda's sharing she's going to use more game-based activities to start large group and engage more children at groups. Yes, Marnie's got some new ideas, which is great. And Juana's asking, can you share ideas for mixed groups of like 2 to 5 year olds? That can be really challenging, Juana. I know from my personal experience. I don't know that we have time to do like too many super specific ideas, because that really depends on your specific learning goals and what you want children to learn. But what I would suggest for a mixed group based on my own experience is that when you're planning a play-based learning activity, think about the base skill that you want children to practice. Kind of build your game around that. So maybe what the 2-year-old needs to practice, you start there. And then you think of ways to make the game more challenging for older children. And you can come up with a couple different levels of more challenging games. So how do we make it a little bit harder? So if I'm playing letter detective with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, I might need to know that I'm going to have to walk around with a 2-year-old and say, oh, we're looking for the letter that makes a duh sound. That's a D. We're looking for the letter D. The letter D looks like this. I might have to show them a picture. And I might know that with a 5-year-old, I might need to hide those letter cards pretty good. I would hide them pretty easily for a 2-year-old in my classroom, but a 5-year-old, they're going to be able to find things that are higher up or better hidden in my classroom. So I can still do one fluid activity, but I've kind of set it up to be able to meet the needs of multiple children in my group. So that's kind of my suggestion, is to start with the simplest activity and then work out how do I make it more challenging for the children that need something that's a little bit more challenging. And that might be that sometimes you don't do the activity all together in one group. Maybe it means that, for the children who need something more challenging or the child who needs something that's more simple, maybe you do that as a more one-on-one. Maybe it's kind of a separate activity you could offer during a large group time or outside time, so that they have an opportunity to play the game that works best for them. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions that have come in. So while we're getting our information together to send you in the chat box about getting your certificate for today's presentation, I want to be the first to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such an honor to talk with you. I so appreciate you sharing your thoughts and ideas and questions. On the screen, you'll see some references. You will have access to the PowerPoint. After you complete the certificate and everything, you'll have access to the PowerPoint. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We really hope that you'll be able to join us next month. Our presentation is going to be on executive functioning, presented by my colleague, Erica King. She's fantastic. And executive functioning is such an important topic. So we're really excited to have you join us then. Thank you all so much again. I hope you have a fantastic Thursday and a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon.